Thanks so much for being Substack subscribers. Here, as promised, is the rest of our interview with Krystal and Saagar Enjeti, as well as a chat that we have about a little beefing between the Young Turks and Aaron Maté.
People spent probably over $1 billion in venture capital trying to basically do what Krystal and I did, which was create a news show which millennials watch. And the reason it failed was because it was venture backed, as in the suits had the vision. They're like, this is what millennials really want. Or they were like, this mic, like that's millennial branded news. Or what was that shitty BuzzFeed show on Twitter? I don't even remember. AM to whatever. Yeah. Horrible. I mean, Twitter spent millions of dollars on this stuff, right? Like all of these people were chasing it. Krystal and I near the end, what were we getting? 2 million views, 2.5, something like that. Over 1 million uniques a day, better than CNN, literally better than a CNN primetime show in terms of the number of people who watched it. But here's the truth, is that the suits hate it. You know, all the suits are always going to hate the show because this millennials news and everything is all antithetical to like the boomer mindset, the boomer consumerism, like propping up like whatever they want. So the only way to actually have the CNN of the future, in my opinion at least, is to do what we did, which was to go primarily subscriber, or at least in the very beginning, all sub, all audience-based support. That's the only way, in my opinion, in order to like actually create whatever CNN for millennials actually want. As in, instead of like some bullshit corporate vision of like what millennial news should be.
Well, they just thought, let's have the same like tired tropes and status quo politics with a younger person delivering it. It's like the Pete Buttigieg model, you know, like the same old bad ideas, but just with a younger face. That was their idea of how to appeal to millennials or consumers.
Or they wanted some kind of technological magic bullet that would allow them to create content without having to have any thought, like Upworthy or whatever it was, you know what I mean? Let's find a headline that optimizes attention from all these different demographics. Like, why don't you just sit down and think about it for a few minutes? You know what I mean? That's probably more cost efficient than building an entirely new machine.
Yeah. Although I do want to say, I think MSNBC is really about to crack the code with their new Nicole Wallace streaming show.
Okay, what is this? I kind of saw something about that, and I saw
Peacock. Yeah.
Is that
She's
what
going to have a streaming program targeted for millennials? This is a no shit real thing.
Propagandist. That's what the millennial, that's what young audiences are really looking for these days.
It's their youth-themed property, right?
Yes,
what was the language they used?
It's their Peacock millennial-focused streaming initiative via Peacock. So not only have you sign up for shitty Peacock, I don't know why anybody would do that. So you can watch Morning Joe Extra, by the way. You can do two, and so she's already on the air for 2 hours. So they're just gonna. It's like
more, but you need
what
more.
Is the third hour of millennial Nicole Wallace? Like that's what I want to know. That
is
I really
real? This is real. It's like really called millennial something.
Well, I mean, that's what they say. They went. They had this whole flashy Wall Street Journal piece.
Guys, the thing young people want is more Nicole Wallace. 2 hours on MSNBC every single day is not enough. That's the bottom line.
Can we start the hunt for the millennial who wants the third hour of Nicole Wallace?
Yeah. Third hour millennium. I'm a THM.
Just easy. I mean, just go to like a Young Democrats club, like a college like right there.
Yeah,
you got them.
Right.
Go pick your like Young Democrat, valedictorian, Pete Buttigieg for America volunteer.
Oh, anybody that was doing that dance.
Yeah,
oh my God!
This whole city. That's Washington.
That. Oh my God!
Anybody doing the High Hopes dance for the third hour of Nicole Wallace for sure.
Wow!
It's like a zombie movie. They're just teaming the masses outside the window right as we speak. Yeah.
So she's in discussion. Have they pulled the trigger? Because I see she was in discussions.
I don't know.
I don't know if it's real, but I mean, the fact that it even made it into the pages of the Wall Street Journal is like, I don't even know.
Yeah, that means that at least 5 or 6 people had to have the conversation and agree that it was a good idea. Right.
Yeah, she's saying, right. She's according to the Washington Post, she's in discussions about a new Peacock show.
Yes. Right. Because why not hold out and negotiate the extraordinarily high price that you should get for that kind of service, right? Because it just has so much potential.
The
That's the joke I was trying
tremendous.
to make. Yeah.
It should be called Nick at Night. She could do it at night.
Oh, clever.
You're welcome, Nicole. Yeah.
Is it a night program?
It should be, just so she can do that, grab that title.
Right. That would be really interesting, like an 11:30 p.m. kind of going.
You should see if you can go ahead and buy that URL, Katie, so they have to buy it back.
You're right.
Take it.
Little business idea for you.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
good idea. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. There could be like a war criminals sub Peacock stream. Like a sub channel,
like a Twitch stream or something.
They gotta have a way to distinguish from mainline MSNBC.
Yeah, you're
like,
right.
How's
you're
that
right.
different?
Well, I mean, there's like passive war crime enabling, and then there's more active.
What is it like after dark? Warmongers after dark.
Yeah, Warmongers after.
Warmongers after dark. That's a good show.
Peacock.
Bill Krystal, kind of drunk, explaining selling the Iraq War. I would watch that.
That would be great. Drunk neocon history.
Right.
I would hate watch that. Yeah, that would give us some great content for breaking points. I have to say.
That's true.
Yeah.
That would be a great segment. Yeah.
What's the ripoff of the Japanese game show that's now being hosted by John Cena? You know, the one where they're like, I don't know, they're jumping on huge obstacles. Wipeout. Yes. Like if they did that with Bill Krystal and who's another good like
Steve Schmidt,
Brennan, or
Brennan, something
Brennan,
like that.
Or Clapper.
Yeah.
Clapper is the creepiest one, in my opinion.
Is Clapper hired by MSNBC? Because
he's a CNN contributor. Sorry.
Oh, CNN contributor. Is Brennan CNN or MSNBC?
No,
MSNBC.
NBC
obviously, because he's ashamed of being a straight white man. So obviously,
one of my favorite segments that we ever did, Krystal. Remember when Clapper was being interviewed and asked about a confidential program, and then the camera just went black?
Yeah.
I mean. They said it was a technical error, but it was like it was literally live TV. And it was,
he used his psionic powers.
He still knows people. He's still people higher up in those agencies.
I remember that was one of our first segments that went like really viral. I was laughing so hard.
That is excellent.
Are there any segments or stories that you couldn't do that you're now going to do that you're excited about doing?
So one thing that I've been thinking about is we'll just be a little less hesitant about some of the, I would say, types of guests we have on in particular.
Yeah, exactly.
Where, because we always know what we're going to say and, what boundaries we're going to be within. And, most of that was, I'm not going to say they liked it at the Hill, but they came to let us say it. But I'll feel more comfortable. We have this great guy, Army Ose Frimpong, Flunky Academic on YouTube. Everybody should go sub.
Oh yeah.
He can definitely. He's
a wild card.
And he's a wild card. And he's got some fairly radical views. And I always find him really profound. Even when I disagree with him, I get a lot out of talking to him. He's a very thoughtful, smart guy. And we'd always kind of hold our breath when we did segments with him of like, is there going to be something that's just outside of what the Hill's going to be remotely okay with here? On some of these things, it's hard to point to super specific instances, but you can't help but be influenced by the structures around you, the incentives around you, where, your knowledge of where the boundaries are. And I would say, especially my natural personality and inclination is to be like a people pleaser. I'm the A student. I want everybody to be happy with me. And so I'm very aware of the way that those influences operate in the back of your mind, even when you're really trying hard for them not to. Yeah. So it's more of just a sense of taking any sort of, governors off, being able to really feel like we're making all of the choices that we would make without any sort of pressure or influence, et cetera. So that's kind of how I would think about it, more than like a specific person or a specific segment.
Yeah. And with the real freedom of this, and Matt, I'm sure you dealt with this when you're at Rolling Stone. They never call you. They call the boss, or the boss's boss. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, it's going to be a real problem. I mean, the threats, right? And everything is vague. Everything is like, it's not said. But the only reason I can even tell that story about Maxine Waters or TikTok is it's not just that I left the Hill. I'm now not newly employed at some other place, which would get mad at me for telling, because guess what? You think the Maxine Waters chief of staff doesn't know that, like, if I went to go work at the Daily Beast or something, or if I went to go work at, like, anywhere, anywhere
National Review, it doesn't matter.
Anywhere, it doesn't matter. They all know who to call. They've been doing this for years, and they always know how to put on the screws and make it so they're like, oh, it'd be a shame if your press credential didn't get renewed, or be like, oh, yeah, you're not getting invited to this next press conference. Or they have 1,000 different ways they can screw. And if they don't screw you, they'll screw over one of your colleagues. So like Krystal said, I would be an asshole if I didn't at least think, what if I say here, is it going to get somebody in trouble? Because, by the way, that happened many times, I'm sure, for people who were run-of-the-mill reporters. I don't even want to think about it. Like, it's one of these things where, like, I shouldn't even have it in my mind. And now that we've self-exited the system, I'm really glad. I want people to know this is how it works. Not just that the Hill was low on the totem pole. Now imagine you working in the New York Times or the Washington Post. You think they don't all have Marty Barron's phone number, or whoever, or Jeff Bezos or whatever, and that everybody in that ecosystem, these people need to get paid. And it's not just about like making a, like, look, if you make it to the Post or the Times and you're like a normie center left journo, you made it. Like, you're upper middle class. You're getting paid, and you get to work at the top tier place in journalism. And there's a price that comes with that, right? And they all know the price. You didn't make it unless you got there. I didn't want to pay that anymore, or I didn't want to pay that period, or for the rest of my life. A lot of these people are comfortable. I don't necessarily blame them, but people should know how it actually works. Yeah,
that is true. Like you'll find out years later I remember when I did the Goldman story, I would hear stories years later about, at this party, this Goldman executive talked to my boss's boss's boss. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and
exactly.
And it's not like, the message comes down to you like, oh, well, they were unhappy about this. It's more like, it's just the fact that they had the conversation enters your head. And you just know that's the way the news business
You're
works.
a human being. You would be crazy if you didn't think about that. You have to get paid. Like, we have to pay bills,
Well, and then you just start asking yourself, like, okay, is it really worth it? Right? Like, is this story, is this segment or whatever, is it worth the hoops I'm gonna have to, is it worth the pushback? Is it worth the way that I'm gonna be judged? And also, as you guys have talked about a million times, like, if you're wrong in the sanctioned and approved ways, not only are you not punished, you're usually rewarded.
Right.
But God forbid you get something wrong in a way that's like not sanctioned or not approved, or even sometimes when you're right in a way that's not sanctioned or not approved, there's a cost for that. And so, in fact, it may be even greater when you are right about things that make the established narrative mad, is probably where the greatest punishment ultimately comes in, because you can't have that.
Yeah, well, it's not an accident that almost everybody who had a certain view on the Russia story is now working in some form of independent,
Sidelined.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Or conservative media. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. What about that? I mean, will there be any changes to the format? In other words, you had this kind of self-conscious, it was, Krystal on the left and Saagar on the right. Is there going to be any change or flexibility in those definitions going forward? Are you going to feel less like you have to be in that mode in the new version?
For me personally, absolutely. I don't really even, frankly, I've said this before, given Stop the Steal, I basically don't identify with the political right at this current time.
Because they didn't go far enough. They're at. There was so much more they could have done.
Oh, that's right. That's it. No, you're
short.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the
that's why.
failed. How can you support a bunch of losers who couldn't even overturn a presidential election?
That actually is part of the story, which is that these people are such losers they can't even pull off, anything properly. But that's one part. No, I mean, it's one of these things, and I'm sure you guys all felt this with Russiagate. It was one of those. It was like, this is bullshit. Like, this is a total lie. And if I have to, and this is the thing, I don't want to be one of those like Lincoln Project people who are like, restore the soul. Like, I fully acknowledge the majority of the GOP is all in on Stop the Steal. They're all in on Trump, no matter what he says. That's fine. They can do whatever they want. I'm just not going to be part of it.
Yeah. Did you just come out? Did you just leave your party?
No, I mean, I never was really even part of the party. I never was part of any of these. Like, I hated Republicans probably more than I hated Democrats for most of the time. I even identified with the political right. But that, I mean, look, I'm very unique. I don't pretend to speak.
Probably not actually, but go ahead. Yeah,
sure. Right.
That is here to tell you you're not special.
Right. Unlike most people, I don't have to stay in the lane, and I don't want to. That was another part of the Hill, which is it'd be one of those things where, like, well, why are you criticizing Republicans all the time? I'm like, because I want to. Like, this is what I think. You know, so it's like one of these things is part of the strictures of the program itself. But frankly, and I said this already, the real constraint was not the format, it was the business model, which is like the Hill's business model is clicks, advertising revenue from YouTube. So you have to do a lot of content, even if you don't necessarily want to that day. And you have to do it and optimize it for viewership, eyeballs. Now, look, frankly, I'm not going to lie. Like, it was definitely a good thing because a lot of people saw our faces, but sometimes you don't want to talk about something that you don't necessarily want. Or like, I mean, I said before, one of my favorite segments I ever did, semiconductors. I loved talking about that stuff. Yeah. I love talking about like deeper structural problems that I thought, but I knew it wasn't going to get clicks. So I would do maybe like 1 out of 5 segments, 1 out of 6. And in the early days, I'll be honest, I didn't get to cover it as much because I knew that we were under such pressure in order to deliver from viewership. So that is actually what will really free us. However many segments that are required that day, we will do. They will go as long as they need to go. They don't need to be 8 minutes or 10. If they need to be 20, so be it. If it needs to be 1 hour 15, so be it. Like, it just doesn't matter.
A semi-weekly semiconductor.
Oh, fine. I would be happy to. I love talking about that.
We're going to bring you in for that one, Katie.
Thank you.
I don't
want to be too obvious.
That would be historic streaming. That's the millennial show.
That's what the millennials and the Zoomers in particular talk to
actually,
any Zoomer.
The ones who can't get PS3s are pretty pissed off about semiconductors, or PS5s. I'm sorry.
That's actually true. Yeah.
Pissed off about semiconductors. So.
You know what's funny though is a lot of the things that we've been towards the end of our time at Rising. I'd say number one, we built an audience that was big enough that we felt like we could take some of these risks. Number two, we knew we were on our way out, so we're less like obsessed with having to get the numbers and the clicks and grow the channel and whatever, because ultimately we're like, this isn't our channel anymore. This is the Hills channel, and they're going to take it and do with it whatever they want. And so we took a lot more risks on covering things that it was like, I have no idea if anyone is going to click on this. One of the ones that comes to mind is I did, instead of something that was like really punchy on the news, I did a kind of higher level thing about what's going on with housing, with prices skyrocketing and all this like permanent capital buying up the housing stock and turning. And I really genuinely, I really liked the radar when I wrote it, but I was like, I have no idea whether anyone's going to care about this. It had this just sort of like vague title on it. And it ended up being one of the biggest monologues that I ever did. And so not every risk that we took paid off, but I actually think part of why Rising almost uniquely among political shows in the Biden era has not only survived, but it, we were getting our biggest numbers ever when we went to
the month we left,
is because we were doing, those deeper, like bigger societal trend type of stories that we're really fascinated by. And I think it's also what a lot of people out there in the world are fascinated by, because there are these tectonic shifts happening. That there are going to be massive follow-on effects from the insanity of the last year and the tumult of, all of these trends coming together and being in this in-between space where neoliberalism has sort of failed. And yet you have like the preeminent neoliberal running the country, leader of the free world. There's a lot of interest and fascination with that. And so part of what we really want to do at Breaking Points is to continue to dive deep into those trends and see what we find and see where it leads.
I can't wait.
But isn't that one of the, not to get too nerdy about this, but again, the business for most of the last 20 years has been infected with this AI / machine learning thing where all the people on the business side of media have been chasing formulaic ways to get eyeballs and clicks.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what they've been looking for. Like, what topics work? Like, let's make a list. Let's hit those topics.
What are the Google trends of today? What are people clicking on today? Yeah.
But that stifles innovation. That's the thing. Nobody would have told you that talking about the things that we talk about, we're going to get clicks. But you build person's trust, and you build on that, and you build on that, and you get real organic growth. And then people word of mouth spread it, and it goes viral. Like, this has happened to us so many different times. We've done so many random stories which get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views. And it's unbelievable. And almost always it's covering something that the corporate media either wouldn't cover or filling in the gaps. Like I remember in the very early days of the show trying to program, it'd be like, why aren't you guys covering impeachment? And I was like, well, because there's 7 other networks that are all covering it. And I was like, is your job to chase the same story as everybody else? Like, it's called business. Like, you fill a niche which doesn't exist. Or I mean, you fill a niche which is being unserved. Like, it was not from the very beginning. And what you're talking about, Matt, I mean, I came up in this, man. Like, in terms of the tabloid business, it's all just about like doing 5% better each day. Be like, how do we optimize our clicks? Like A/B test this, right? But like, you're locked in the same competition. So you're going to divide all the wealth, you know, and everybody's going to be fighting over pennies. Whereas, how do you succeed in business? Like, find a niche which nobody else is serving. And for a variety of interests, Rising's audience, which is predominantly extremely disaffected young people, where nobody was talking to them. And so that's what we did.
That's so interesting because, you know, again, you're talking about where you were working. I think that created behaviors in a lot of journalists where they started spending all their time on Twitter trying to anticipate where's the viral heat going to be in 20 minutes or in a day. And I'll do that story. Yes. But I think what we're finding out with a lot of these subscriber-based models is that if you just throw that out entirely, you know, you never know. Like, as you say, Krystal, the audiences are interested in so many things that you can't anticipate, you know?
What has your experience been like on Substack, getting to cover what you want to cover and the response from the audience?
Totally different than what I thought, you know? I mean, there are some things that you know, and actually we've talked about this before. Like, if you do anything criticizing the media, it does well. Like, and that's because there's basically a bottomless amount of rage out there towards the news media. That's true.
Also, like, other news media people will be afraid to do it because it's their friends.
Yes, right. Exactly. Right. No, that's the biggest thing. All right, from the market perspective, they can't do it. Even though when I was a White House correspondent, everyone fucking hated Jim Acosta, and nobody would say it. And the only person who would was like the guy who worked at Fox, right? But like, I was like, am I going crazy? Like, I fucking hate this guy. And everyone's like, oh yeah, man, he's a fucking asshole. And they'll all say it over drinks, but nobody will say it publicly. In public, they're like, Jim is a great friend and a great colleague. I'm like, oh, fuck you. I'm like, I heard you complaining about him in the basement 2 minutes ago. And then they go on air and like,
in the basement, putting his life on the line.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's just an example. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's true. But but you find out that like, there's all these rules that when you work in conventional media, that they teach you that, you know, you have to keep things within a certain length, or else audiences get bored. If you pick a topic that is technical or is sort of takes a lot of explanation, they'll tune out of that too. That turns out not to be true. Like, you know,
it's the opposite in my opinion.
It's the opposite. Like, if you spend a lot of time on something that's kind of arcane and difficult, like those sometimes are the most successful pieces. But you'll find, I mean, you already know this, right? Like, this is the conventional wisdom about almost all this stuff is wrong. You find that out once you're out of that whole click universe.
My favorite example of what you're talking about, Matt, and the like conventional wisdom, which is oftentimes based on literally nothing, just like somebody's assumption that just got written down as gospel. When I was at MSNBC in like 2015, I remember during the TPP negotiations and everything, like something obviously I was into, am into, et cetera. And I was told in no uncertain terms, nobody cares about trade. Right before Trump and Bernie and all of that, I was like, no one cares about trade. I was like, maybe no one on the Upper East Side is caring about trade right now, but I guarantee you. But then again, I mean, if you're thinking about the MSNBC audience at this point, not a lot of them sort of in the places that have been most affected by NAFTA and these bad trade deals. So maybe in terms of the MSNBC audience, they were correct. But in terms of the country and the issues that people obviously cared a whole lot about, just wildly off base.
Well, remember, Stephanie Rule was very triggered by the total like talking point lie that Biden versus Trump was. What was it? Scranton versus Park Avenue.
She took offense on behalf of Park Avenue.
She may not live on Park Avenue, but she lives pretty close. Pretty close,
and
she works her butt off to get there.
I believe it was pretty darn close.
Do you not want my vote?
No.
He lives on 3rd Avenue. I checked.
And by the way, lady, you're going to vote for Biden anyway. So shut up. We all know
holding out the Stephanie Rule, holding out her vote for
that was awesome. Awesome
way,
TV.
Right?
Yeah.
Like at least she was willing to use her leverage to get, what she wanted, which was,
another
more
thing.
Pro Park Avenue policies.
They were like, you shouldn't go longer than 10 minutes. And I was like, are you aware that there's a dude who talks about chimps for 3 hours and he's the biggest podcaster in the world?
Oh God, that drives me crazy. Like,
and I'm like, have you been on the internet in the last 10 fucking years? Cause I was like, am I the only person who has? Cause that's not true. I mean, I know it's not true. And it's all these like little ticks about, oh, you shouldn't say that because it'll get you disinvited from this party. I'm like, okay, I don't care. Like, I actually just don't care. But like, it's one of those things where it all gets stacked on each other over and over. And it becomes this like ossified thing where you have these rules, like nobody cares about trade, or nobody has the attention span for 8 minutes, or that stuff, it's not worth poking that, or like it's not true. It's actually really what it is. It's so patronizing to people because people's interests, people are hungry for like real information, real conversation, and all of that. They're just not getting it. And there are a variety of structural reasons why.
That's really interesting. The thing about trade is just, it's so classic because all it is it's a bunch of news directors and editors who are internalizing what they really want to hear about.
Exactly.
And they're forgetting that even if you're just being cynical about it and thinking about it in terms of the money's in the masses of people who live somewhere else, and they're not capable, I think, of escaping their own paradigm, in terms of thinking about that kind of stuff.
You see the result of that in the fact that CNN and MSNBC and Fox News have had their ratings just like totally nosedive.
That's
in the Biden era, they built their entire, every single freaking segment was on one side, Donald Trump, the moral of the story is Donald Trump is bad. On the other side, it's like the moral of the story is Democrats are bad or Donald Trump is good. And so when he's gone, they're just like, I don't know, let's do another QAnon segment. Let's do another Marjorie Taylor Greene segment. Let's see if that'll work. But and the audience, especially at CNN and MSNBC, they were promised basically like, defeat Trump and you can stop paying attention to politics and not care anymore. And so they're happy to take him up on that deal.
It's amazing. Do you think your audience is going to be different in any way? Or is it already, obviously substantially it's going to be the same people at the start, but
I hope not, because the thing that I really was proud of with our audience is that it genuinely was across the political spectrum, really from, lefties like me to people who were Trump supporters and, very like
far
animated about, and even like people that, and ideologies that we kind of trash all the time, like neoliberals and like economic libertarians. We get all kinds of messages that are like, you probably wouldn't like my politics, but I like you guys. So
cool.
I hope, I hope we keep that ideological diversity because I like it that number one, we're pissing somebody off in our audience every day. And we also, people come to us not because they necessarily think they're going to agree with every word or love everything we have to say, but they feel like we're going to be coming at it as honest actors. And I hope that we maintain that sort of like diversity of thought within our audience.
I think so too. I honestly think it's going to get bigger just because of the way that our content distribution is. Like now people can listen to it as a podcast, which wasn't a whole other thing, which is like Rising was only available in clips, right? Like the biggest request we would get, can I watch the full show? Can I listen to it as a podcast? Like all of that. Yeah. The answer to those things now is yes. And so I think that the audience will only get bigger. We bet on ourselves, not only because we knew the size of our audience, but because we know the growth, which is that what's the most hated institution in America right now? The media. There's a reason, right? Like that's the reason all of us right here are doing well. And it's because nobody wants to say it who works within the system. And so I really believe, and I was so proud of that too, which is, people on the right who really were like, hey, I was just waiting for someone to say like what Trump said was wrong. Like that was it. Like, and they're like, I can't hear it anywhere else. Or if they can, it's from somebody like Bill Krystal, who also hates them. And people on the left who are like, man, I just so appreciate like what you guys said. Or, I've heard from like far right people who are like, hey, I just feel like Krystal doesn't hate me. Like, and that was, That's so basic. It's so much of our, I mean, Matt, you wrote the book on this literally, which is that so much of our media is based upon just like pure outrage and hate towards one another. And it is just
fear of one another.
I don't think it really hit home for me till January 6th, like just how bad it really is. And I've personally played a role in it, and I feel terrible about it, which is that you don't know, really what the force of that hate and you're putting on the population. If you bombard somebody with 20 years of propaganda about how awful the other side is, you can't live together. It's just not going to work. Yeah. And most people don't want that. That's the thing, is most people just want to go about their daily lives and wave at their neighbor and not give a shit about politics. But like, we have made it impossible otherwise. And if there's anything, the mission of Breaking Point's, like, that's what it is, which is just making people hate each other less.
Just to piggyback on that, I don't know if you guys saw this new working paper from Thomas Piketty.
I heard about it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's really worth digging into, because there's some very profound insights in there. But one of the things that he finds is there's a direct correlation between these sort of like sectarian conflicts and your inability to do anything good from an economic policy perspective. So the couple of places that have bucked the trend of basically all of the educated elites moving to the left party and all of the like sort of more working class population moving towards the right party, those are places, Ireland and Portugal are the two places that he mentions, where they don't have these sort of like sectarian conflicts centered in their politics. And so that enables the type of politics that I know I believe in, Katie believes in, Saagar believes in. I don't know exactly what Matt believes in, but he's more or less in the same zone. But yeah, I think, that's sort of, because what it collapses down to, if the entire content of your politics is just about like, who's on the other side, who do you hate, what are the right words to say to put that other side in its place, then it makes it impossible to have universal programs that are going to help everybody. Why do I want to help this person who like wants to destroy me and destroy my life? Why do I want to help this person who I'm afraid of or who I hate? Yeah. It really renders the type of politics that at least I believe in impossible. This trend of educated elites, like education elites congregating in effectively the Democratic Party in all these countries around the world, and financial elites remaining in the right wing or Republican Party, except actually the US, where even the financial elites have mostly moved over predominantly into the Democratic Party. And again, the reason for that is partly because the US politics has become all about this like culture war and identity wars. And that's why you have this coalescing of basically all elites.
Which is like 90% media driven.
Yes.
90% media driven. That's right. Exactly right. That's exactly right.
And the thing was frustrating for me for years and years and years is this: we kind of lie to ourselves about what the consequences of it are. Like, we all know that we're winding people up when we do certain kinds of content, and we just kind of pretend that it's not going to have some kind of cumulative effect. But
oh well, if nobody else would do it, if I don't do it, I'm playing in the game. It's the whole Warren thing. Like, I was a player in the game. And
is that like is that prisoner's dilemma? Is that what describes that dynamic of like everybody's individual interest? Or it might be like Tragedy of the Commons, right? Yeah, where you're like overfishing in the sea of outrage and everybody's doing it. So it just ruins it for everybody.
But isn't that kind of boring? I mean, don't we all like traffic in that a little bit? Because it's kind of boring to just be praising. All right. So I'm just trying to think like I was excited about Bernie, obviously. Like, I'm trying to think of what I get,
it's not that about. It's the attitude of, you talk about that viewer the right-wing viewer who says, I'm just glad that Krystal doesn't hate me. It's the
so we can hate powerful people,
and the
but
attitude that comes through in all these shows, right? It's the contempt. And you're also like egging on your viewers to have that same kind of feeling, right? Yes. And that's what's absolutely like, even this silly the lab leak story. I think what drives people crazy about it was the sanctimony of it at the beginning, right?
Debunked.
Yeah. And now that they're being told, oh, you can think this other thing now, like they're reacting with like rage about it because they were told something else entirely with this kind of condescending point of view. I don't know. I think we do that all the time.
The consequences are so real, man. Like, you know, we got messages too from people who were like, I'm like, I did everything I could to get my dad off Fox onto Rising, right? Like, or I get these messages from these kids who are like, yo, like making my boomer wine mom watch your content so that she becomes less like, and the thing is the mom will give it a shot because it was high-end production value. Right. So she's like, okay, this isn't one of, you know, so-and-so's YouTube friends. Like these are, you know, like a real,
Katie Halper, Matt
Taibbi.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was one of these things where like young people who are our age, I think, they know what it's done to their parents or their communities and stuff. And like, dude, like where I'm from in Texas, I mean, it's bad in terms of what people think about liberals and more. And actually, like, that's kind of what made me more reactionary against it, or at least more understanding of like where a lot of this stuff comes from. And, you know, you also see yourself become a victim of it, which is that think about who you follow on Twitter. And if you develop enough of an ecosystem, I mean, it starts to get mad, right? You're like, these motherfuckers, like they're at it again. And, you know, and you can literally feel your blood pressure rise. And it takes a lot of consciousness to be like, no, it's not that important. Who actually cares? Is it really worth getting all spun up about this? And people live their whole lives this way. And I think a bigger problem is that the journalists are self-internalizing this because we all know they're the most miserable people on earth. They hate themselves. They hate themselves. And so they channel their hatred outward. And they know subconsciously, like you're saying, Matt, what they're doing, but they're like, hey, someone's got to eat. You know, it's all about the incentives built within the system.
Yeah.
That's so true because, you know, 30, 40 years ago, when you turn on the news, you felt like going to sleep. And now when you turn on your phones, it makes you want to kill somebody.
Yes.
There's a big difference somehow, I guess, in what we're doing.
And I guess, Katie, to answer your question about like, you know, obviously anyone who's watched Rising knows that we're not all like, let's all sing Kumbaya and we're have happy time. Like, my view is, number one, I believe in the politics of actually having like a multiracial working class movement. And so part and parcel of that is this notion of solidarity and trying to see the best in people who could be potential allies in that movement. And so I really resist this sort of like punching down, individual shaming, like, let's play the video of the stupid Trump supporter or the like outrageous Antifa person in Portland or whatever, or judging like normal. That's a lot of what's going on during the pandemic is like, let's super judge normal people just trying to figure out for themselves amidst incredibly confusing advice, what is the best thing for them to do for themselves and their family. That's the sort of thing that I really, really hate and really try to resist. Animosity towards the people who are in charge of this mess of a system and maintaining the status quo, I have zero limits or bounds on in that direction. But hating one another and really believing that like your neighbor is the biggest threat to your life, which is what a majority of Americans believe right now, that's the type of politics that I think is completely destructive. It makes the country unlivable. And it's just, I mean, it just ends in nowhere good.
And now we have another segment we like to do that we started last week, which is, isn't that useful idiots bump?
We have another one?
So yeah, last week, people make sure they check out their usefulidiots.substack.com to find a really good interview with Aaron Maté, who, little behind the scenes, fourth wall destruction again. When Matt, when you asked Aaron Maté on, did you know he was in Syria?
Oh, no, I didn't. No,
right? So it was like really good fortuitous timing because you asked him on to talk about the Russian elf. He turned out he was in Syria, and I don't know, did you see the mini war between him and Cenk?
Yes.
So yeah, I like to think that even though we didn't release the episode yet, we put it into the ether that Aaron Maté was in Syria. I think people sensed it energetically. Mm-hmm. And so Cenk Uygur tweeted something out basically attributing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to religious fundamentalism on both sides. And Aaron Maté responded by saying, my God thinks that's the worst tweet ever, because Cenk was referring to, it being about God. And that had Anna Kasparian and Cenk really flip out. And you know what? This whole thing is just like there is a war, basically, this big beef between over force the vote, right? I think this is a good way to describe it. Between basically a Jimmy Dore faction and the Young Turks faction, right?
Right.
There's been a long-term beef between Jimmy Dore and Sam Seder, and then it kind of, extended to this. There's been, a lot of ridiculous backs and forths. A lot of people getting angry. I said this before, probably, like, I think I tweeted this, and I've said this on my show, which is that it's just a losing battle for the Young Turk side, in my opinion, because just aesthetically, like, their thing is that they're the reasonable adults in the world, right? They're reasonable adults in the room. They're the adults in the room. I just think the other side looks much better. Like when Jimmy is like fighting with people, taking them on, calling them out, like that's his thing. Like he's outraged and outrageous.
Oh, in other words, if you asked him to play the adult in the room, it would be harder for him.
Well, not just that, but it's like they're if their shtick is that they're not like Jimmy, right? Their shtick is that they are the cool, calm, collected people. When they get into these beefs, I just think they look like petty.
Right.
Whereas Jimmy's just like doing the Jimmy. Like it's on brand and it's consistent for him to be like, calling people out. And then these guys are like, oh, he's so divisive and inflammatory.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, okay, but then you shouldn't do something like the following.
They said Aaron Maté yelled at me. And so
Aaron Maté lied. Aaron Maté. everyone cares what Aaron Maté has to say, right? Okay. The guy who denies that Syrian children were killed with chemical attacks. Yeah.
And
fuck
gets
Aaron
paid
Maté.
by the...
Yeah, fuck you.
Anyway, let's move on.
Let's end the freaking pod. I can't.
Okay, see, that's what happened.
I can't stand that guy, and I can't stand the very intentional disinformation they put out there in regard to disgusting dictators around the world. The very people they seem to be working for, to be quite honest with you. Let's move on.
All right, we're done.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
So a couple things to point out there.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah, I wish, and for people just listening, Matt's facial expression is pretty priceless. I mean, what's funny is that, like, everyone cares about what Aaron Maté has to say. Well, apparently some people care, and those people include Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur.
Yeah, I guess I must have missed the back. So this has to do with the force the vote, or is it Syria?
Let's. I don't. Maybe that's not even a fair. But there is. I feel like there's a beef between one side who calls everyone grifters, and one side who calls everyone neoliberal shills.
Neoliberals and shitlibs,
shills,
right?
Yeah. Neoliberal shills and shitlibs, all that, yeah. I mean, and to be like, I'm obviously, I'm on the side of the people.
You're kind of a floater.
Yeah, I think I'm whatever. What is it? Something curious?
Yeah.
I'm
curious.
Shitlib curious. I mean, I straddle the shitlib border. What do you do? I got one foot in shit and one foot in grifter.
Right.
I'm a lib grifter.
Right.
I mean, I do try to be somewhat of a peacemaker, and I definitely do have friends on both sides of the issue. But here's where I do think that a line needs to be drawn, because I'm kind of like, we can't afford on the left to just be like canceling people or not working with people or vilifying people. But I do also think that we kind of can't be just like calling people, say that they're working for Russians and Assad. Yeah. I mean, that's our lane. That's who funds us, right? That's who funds us.
That's right. That's our exclusive. We're monopolists on that score. Yeah,
exactly. If people are going to talk about that, then they really need to have the receipts, which they don't. I mean, I don't know what receipts they have to show that he's working for the Russians. I don't know what receipts they have to say that he's working for dictators. Honestly, I like that.
That's a good honestly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that was well done. We have to at some point, and we did do like a little more fourth wall stuff. We did do this at one point. We did do a segment on all the intermisine intramural left on left.
Yeah. And I called it off, but you know what? I guess I have to uncall it.
You got cold feet.
I got cold feet. I didn't want to, so we're gonna have to do this.
I loved it. I was laughing the whole time because my other thing is because I don't get it. Like I don't even know most of these players, and I really don't understand what a lot of these arguments are about. It's just very People's Judean Front versus the People's Front of Judea. You know, that the whole Monty Python. There's a whole joke
I'll
in
never
Life.
get those references. I have to have a binge watch of this. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a whole joke in Monty Python's Life of Brian where it's like these small sects of lefties who are constantly planning to do stuff, and most of what they never actually accomplish anything, but they definitely fight with other groups like themselves all the time. Right. And they have basically the same names. It's the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea. But your take on this is that the left can't afford to be divided, and my take on it is that it's funny.
Yeah, I think maybe it's both. Yeah, I think that there are just some bad. I mean, I not to sound corny, but like I do think that there are different lanes and different roles for different people. And my fear is that when some people are overly vilified, like the Squad, who needs to be pushed, I think that can almost backfire because it makes people more protective of them.
But the feelings, the temperatures run very hot on this stuff. Like, fuck you, Aaron Maté.
Fuck you. And then the finger.
Oh, I missed the finger.
Oh, no, we got to watch it again. Well, let's just do this in real time. Let's go to the first tweet, please. In this insane and libelous clip, Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian say that I'm paid by the Russians, seem to be working for dictators, and deny chemical attacks on Syrian children. I don't care about their disdain for me, but I do care about being smeared. The only state I've worked for is Qatar. As an Al Jazeera producer, I've never worked for or been paid by Russia or any Russians or any other state. By the way, when it comes to paid shilling for disgusting people who kill children, Anna Kasparian doesn't need to look far. She did interview Madeleine Albright, who famously said it was worth killing 500,000 kids.
How is it paid shilling?
Oh, let's see.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
And instead, it was just a softball interview for which Kasparian, I mean, it appeared to have been a paid gig for a NATO conference.
Welcome to your MSC. I am delighted to be here and to have a conversation with the former U.S. Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright. And Madeleine Albright was actually the first
Madeleine Albright looks kind of scary in that.
Secretary of State in the U.S. And it is a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to have a conversation with you.
Well, I'm delighted to be interviewed by you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So,
okay, all right. Yeah, I get it.
I mean, I don't know if it was just to be, I haven't seen the receipts on whether it was paid for, but then a couple tweets down, when Cenk Uygur opens by saying Aaron Maté yelled at me, I think he's referring to this tweet from me below. You can judge for yourself if this constitutes yelling on my part and worth the freak out from Cenk and Anna that ensued. So Cenk had tweeted, Israelis and Palestinians kill each other over which sky god they pretend to speak to. And it's politically incorrect to point out there is no human god, let alone one that favors Jews or Muslims. All this violence over the equivalent of which character they like better in the MCU, which is the Marvel
Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, Cinematic Universe. And then Aaron tweets, my God tells me that this is the worst tweet of all time. So I guess what must have happened is that someone must have tweeted or written in the chat or something that Aaron Maté was yelling at them. And then they freaked out big time. Because no one cares what Aaron Maté. Everyone cares. What's funny is that if you actually just what they were saying without the sarcasm is true. Everyone cares what Aaron Maté has to say, or Cenk and Anna care about what Aaron Maté has to tweet.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking. I probably think violence over which character you like better in this Marvel Cinematic Universe could be justified under certain circumstances.
Yeah, more than over God, right? Certainly.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
The Hulk? Is he in that?
Yeah, he is.
Yes. The cowardly Hulk. That's another story. Mark Ruffalo. I say this.
Oh, right. Yeah, it is. Well, it's that's he's that Hulk too, by the way. I guess all the Hulks are Marvel Hulks, but he's the one who's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe series. Yeah. No, I gotta go with Thor. I think we should fight about that.
Okay.
And shoot at each other.
Yeah, we should. You should what you should do is I'm gonna throw a firecracker at you, and you are gonna level my entire neighborhood, and that'll be what it looks like, right?
That's right. And I'm gonna force you to wear like Thor merchandise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be under rubble, but you can retrieve my body and then put my body in Thor merchandise. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Metaphorically speaking.
I mean, this does have old school Cenk energy to it. It's like Cenk, I think, he went from being kind of a Republican bro to.
Did he?
Oh yeah, he was a conservative Republican. I mean, he wasn't a conservative. He was conservative / a Republican. He wasn't like John Ashcroft Republican. He was like just Republican bro. But I think he was always had strong atheist energy. And I think this is a bit of a both sidesism thing, and really kind of misses the point.
Right.
Like this is about. Oh my God! Do you hear some Israel apologists actually are saying this is like a real estate dispute? That's what they're describing the settlements as, which is
I get it. Like, you think my property extends to here and your property.
Yeah, which is offensive on 2 levels. It's offensive because it's insulting people's intelligence. 3 levels. It's offensive because it's whitewashing, like segregation, apartheid state stuff, which I feel very comfortable saying now because the Israeli Jewish Human Rights Organization, B'Tselem, calls it that. Matt, you don't have to co-sign that because I get as a goy. It's harder.
I'm just trying to stay out of the whole thing.
Yeah, I know.
Go ahead, yeah.
If only other people follow the example. It's also offensive because like, why are you going to like the whole real estate? I don't want Jews associated with real estate transactions anymore than they already are.
I didn't even see that angle.
Yeah. And the Hulk reference is that I guess Mark Ruffalo had referred to what Israel was doing as genocide, and again, as a Jew, and then he apologized for saying that and said it was like inflammatory, contributing to anti-Semitism. And as a Jew, I don't like it when.
So he had a personality change, like the Hulk.
Oh my God, you're right. He was just playing his character. Yeah. He calmed down. But who called him up to calm down? Like, I don't like this. As a Jew, I don't like a lot of things. I don't like when
it would be
like
Scarlett Johansson if we're being consistent.
Oh right, yeah, But who? Oh wow, she got into trouble for like advertising for SodaStream.
Did she?
Yeah.
Why is soda advertising?
Because they're built in. It violates BDS. All right. Anyway, I just want to say I don't like it when it looks like people get phone calls to not criticize Israel because again, it perpetuates that stereotype.
Oh,
like you can't criticize Israel, which again it's true. The problem is like people conflate Zionists with Jews. So we face blowback, we Jews.
Right.
It's so interesting because I realized something, which is that I've historically have had like a kind of visceral response to the term Zionist. Makes me like cringe a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I realized that that's because like anti-Semites use that word interchangeably with Jews. And what some Israel people do is they are doing the same thing. They're basically equating Jewish identity with a certain position on a political project.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to apologize on behalf of the New York Times and Haaretz because they both got in trouble for printing the faces of dead Palestinian children. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Matt is loving this conversation.
No, it's don't mistake my appearance. I'm very interested.
Yeah. He's ripping up a Muslim and Jewish. No, I can't. A Jewish star and what's the Muslim star and crescent? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that whole thing is fuck you, Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian.
Oh, that's what you want to say.